teaching today, I call this the shepherd, the stone, and the covenant of fire. It is a Hanukkah teaching. We start off with John chapter 10, 22 and 24, which Matt read for us. Okay? So let's just clear our hearts and heads right now. We really want everyone to receive this. So, Father, I pray for your Spirit. I pray for the open hearts of everyone here and those who are listening. I pray, Father, that no one will stay the same after today, Father. You teach us, speak to us through your word, by your Spirit. Change us, we pray in Yeshua's name. Amen. John 10, 22 to 24 says, Then came Hanukkah in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking around inside the temple area in Shlomo's colonnade. So the Judeans surrounded him and said to him, How much longer are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, then tell us publicly. Okay, now Yeshua had already made some very, very bold statements at Sukkot. He said that I am the water that you're pouring out. I am the source of living water. You know, he's made a lot of very bold statements, but they really pressed him at Hanukkah. What is the significance of Yeshua being pressed so directly about his messiahship at this festival of Hanukkah? And notice Yeshua's answer to them has to do with his being the shepherd. This is the very topic that he addresses at the beginning of the chapter 10. This is greatly significant at this festival. To understand why the Judeans pressed him so insistently at Hanukkah and the connection to his being the shepherd of Israel, we have to go back to the beginning of where Hanukkah started. So I'm going to give you a quick recap here. Okay? There's an article here by D. Thomas Lancaster, and I'm just going to read you some history here. Okay? The Hanukkah story happened during the turbulent years of the disintegration of Alexander the Great's empire and the rise of Rome. Okay? He came into power at 333 BC, and Daniel had seen this whole prophecy. He'd already seen ahead of time, years before, how the Greeks would come in and take over, and he related him as being the leopard. Then he said that the leopard had 4 heads. And the reason for that is that at the death of Alexander the Great, his dynasty broke up into 4 different dynasties. Okay? And it was in 169 BC that Antiochus took the Seleucid dynasty. Okay? And his army suffered a humiliating defeat in its Egyptian campaign. He shamed, and I don't know if exactly, it was around 200 BC, I think, when he actually took over, is when it was. Let me see. It was 200 BC, the land of Israel was conquered by the Seleucid dynasty as part of their ongoing campaign against the Egyptian-based Ptolemies. It was in the year 175 BC when Antiochus IV inherited that throne. And then he declared himself to be, get this, Epiphanes. Okay, that means the appearance of a god. Behind his back, he was called the madman. They called him Epimanes, Antiochus Epimanes, which means the madman. Okay? Because they're like, he thought he was Zeus in the flesh. Hold on to that thought. So in 169 BC, Antiochus' army suffered a humiliating defeat in its Egyptian campaign. Shamed and angry, Antiochus turned his army back north to return through the land of Israel. And when news reached him of civil unrest in Jerusalem, however, he sacked the city indiscriminately and he slaughtered thousands of citizens. During this siege, he entered the holy temple and stole the gold and silver, including the incense altar, the table, and the menorah. And not long after that, Antiochus issued orders that all nations under his power were immediately to relinquish their various religious beliefs and cultures and embrace Greek culture and faith. On the 15th day of Kislev, an image of Zeus was erected, but he had his face on the statue, okay? Because he was Zeus. He erected that in the temple. This was called the Abomination of Desolation. 10 days later, they began to sacrifice pigs on the altar. Okay? Let's see. I don't want to read this whole thing to you. I just want you to get a good history of this. Many Jews chose to comply with the new laws. They forsook Torah to save their lives. Others stood fast to the covenant and paid for their convictions with their lives. Many of them were tortured and killed because of it. Many brave men and women resisted tyranny during the Hanukkah persecutions. There's a story of a man named Eliezer who chose to die rather than eat a piece of pork. Okay, and that's recorded in 2 Maccabees chapter 6. And then there was a woman by the name of Hannah who had 7 sons, and she watched them all get martyred before her eyes because they would not forsake the Torah. That's recorded in 2 Maccabees 7. Brave Judith pretended to seduce an enemy general and then slew him to liberate her entire town. Sounds like Yael, huh? Okay. But one of the most famous stories is about the priest Mattatyahu. Okay. Mattatyahu and his sons were priests, and they abandoned Jerusalem when the temple was defiled. They could not, however, escape the arm of Antiochus. He sent army folks in there to his town in Modin, and they told Mattathias to come out. They wanted him to sacrifice to an idol. Mattatyahu and his sons refused to comply. Instead, they revolted and they took up arms against the officers and they killed them. Okay? They knew this act of insurrection would bring wrath down upon them. So old Mattatyahu called out to all the people of the town, Modin, and he shouted, "Let everyone who is zealous for the Torah and who stands by the covenant follow after me." And then he and his sons fled into the mountains. Okay, now, Mattatyahu and his sons were not long alone. They started gaining numbers. All those who were zealous for Torah quickly gathered with them, and they soon formed a small army. Mattatyahu himself was old, and he ended up dying in those hills. His oldest son, Judah, took charge of the small rebel group, and engaging in guerrilla warfare against the Syrian occupation, Yehuda and his freedom fighters came to be called Maccabees, which means the hammers. Their early successes attracted attention, and the little army was harassed constantly. Soon enough, the Seleucids sent thousands of mercenary soldiers to root out the rebels in the hills. And they must have thought their efforts were going to be easy and quick to end this revolution, but they weren't. In a stunning victory, the Lord overthrew the massive army before the small band of rebels. Incredible. The war continued for many years. The Maccabees suffered defeats, but also achieved many miraculous victories. Battle after battle, the few overpowered the many, the weak overturned the strong. They pushed forward despite overwhelming odds. Miraculous intervention shifted the battles until at last they were able to take back Jerusalem. Now, there's a phrase that's very popular. It's actually the letters of the 4 words are on the dreidel. And that phrase is, a miracle happened there. Okay? Now, I want to share this with you. This is fascinating. All right? Those 4 letters add up numerically to the number 358. You know what else equals 358? Mashiach. Okay? These things I told you last week. These things don't happen by happenstance. Okay? All right. So, and while we're speaking of such hidden mysteries in the Hebrew, consider this little tidbit. Hanukkah is the festival of lights, and it begins on the 25th of Kislev. Interestingly, the 25th word in Genesis is or, which is light. Okay? So anyway, Judah was the hero who led the revolt that finally brought victory over the Greek oppression. He was a shepherd to Israel. The nation of Israel was under a similar oppression in the days of Yeshua in the 1st century. They needed a hero. This is why they pressed him. Are you the Messiah or not? Because we really need one, okay? They needed a shepherd. They needed a Messiah. They needed a military and political leader who would free them from the Roman oppression. And Yeshua declared his messiahship at Hanukkah, but he did something further. He went further and he declared his equality with the Father, which was far more than what the people were expecting. He did this at Hanukkah. And why is this significant? Why is this significant? Remember, the emperor Antiochus Epiphanes took the name Epiphanes, which means an appearance of a god. And he was called Madman behind his back because of it. Interestingly, the people said the same thing about Yeshua. In John 10:19, they said he's mad. Why listen to his babblings? Okay? At a festival that celebrates the deliverance of Israel by the shepherd, Judah Maccabee, Yeshua declares himself to be the shepherd of Israel. And at a festival that celebrates deliverance from a man that called himself an Epiphany, Yeshua declared that he was the true Epiphany. You see, the counterfeit always precedes the authentic. Incidentally, we're going to see this kind of thing again in the years to come, just prior to the Messiah's second coming, with the rise of the Antichrist. So for those who have eyes to see it, Hanukkah is a prophetic foreshadowing of end-time prophecy, a parable of the anti-Messiah versus the true Messiah. And look at what Jacob states about Yahweh when he prophesies over Joseph in Genesis 49:24. Take a look at this. Genesis 49:24, he's blessing his sons, and when it comes to Joseph, this is what he says. His bow remained taut, his arms were made nimble by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there comes the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Jacob refers to Yahweh as the shepherd and the stone of Israel. In Ezekiel 34, Yahweh states that he is against the shepherds of Israel for their abuses to the people. And then he says, in verses 11 and 12, he says, I, myself, will search for my sheep and look for them. I will rescue them. And then further on in the chapter, we read about this man called the servant of my servant David, the Messiah, whom it says Yahweh will appoint to be the shepherd of Israel in verses 23 and 24. So which is it? Is Yahweh the shepherd? Or is it the servant, the son of David, who is the shepherd? Let's talk about the gematria of 83. Okay? Listen to this. Okay? 83 equals 11 when you add the numbers. 8 plus 3 is 11, and that reduces to 2, which is a number of friendship. It's a number that represents covenant between two. Okay? In John chapter 10, verse 30, we read where Yeshua makes the otherwise blasphemous statement, Ani ve'av echad. I and the Father are one. Guess what? The Hebrew letters that make up that phrase add up to 83. What else adds up to 83? The Hebrew word for body, guf. Guf is 83. Yeshua, in reference to the temple, said, destroy this temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days. Of course, they said, it took 40-some years to build this. You're going to raise it up in 3 days? Well, what does the gospel writer tell us just 2 verses later? In John 2:21, he says, but the temple he had spoken of was his body. Guf, 83. Judaism teaches that God took his wrath out on the temple so that he wouldn't have to destroy the people. The temple was the place where the Shekinah, the holy presence, resided while simultaneously residing in the heavens. This is what we all read in the Torah. And what reason do we have to not believe that? If you're going to believe what the Bible says, you believe he dwelled in the heavens, but he also, his tangible, holy presence was in the temple simultaneously. And then Yeshua says, destroy this temple, and I will raise it in 3 days. He is the temple. Messiah Yeshua is the true temple, where the Shekinah, the holy presence, resides. And we also read in Scripture that we, his people, are the living stones of his temple. That's what Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 3:16. Try to wrap your head around that. His body, where the Shekinah, the holy presence, comes to reside, is his people. Amazing. What else equals 83? Ha-lechem, the bread. Yeshua said, this is my body, which is broken for you. Breaking bread signifies a covenant with those whom you are breaking bread with. He breaks bread with us, you're in covenant with him. You break bread with one another, you're in covenant with one another. Okay? And we read in Daniel 9:26, in reference to the Messiah, it says, then after 62 weeks, Mashiach will be cut off. Now the Hebrew word for cut off there is karat. And karat denotes the cutting of flesh for the sake of a covenant. Destroyed this temple, breaking of the bread. It's all about the body of Messiah that's being offered up as a sacrifice. You know what else equals 83? Hanukkah. The letters that spell Hanukkah, which means dedication. And isn't that what a sacrifice is? One who is totally dedicated. 83 is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is also called the Sukkot of fire. The Sukkot of fire. You see, they weren't allowed to keep Sukkot for a number of years. So when that winter celebration came, they wanted to celebrate Sukkot. They celebrated it for 8 days. And it's called the Sukkot of fire. Now, get this. You can rearrange Bereshit, the first word in the Bible, and get all sorts of things, like sun revealed, Bereshit. But also, you can rearrange the letters and get Brit and Esh, which is covenant of fire, from the very first word in the Bible. In Hebrews 12:29, Paul says, our God is a consuming fire. Now, what about the stone of Israel? Jacob said that the God of Israel is not just the shepherd, but he's also the stone of Israel. Stone is 3 letters. Aleph, Beit, and Nun. Okay, what do you get out of Aleph, Beit? Father. Beit, Nun, you get son. So those 3 letters contain the word for Father and the Son. And you know what they equal? Not 83. It equals 53. 53. And 53 reduces to 8. 5 plus 3 is 8. Okay? Now hold on. Okay? 8 is the number of eternity. 8 is the number of new beginnings. It's very significant for Hanukkah because it was a new beginning for Israel. Okay? Eternity. And it's also associated with a covenant because a son is circumcised on the 8th day. So it's the sign of the covenant. Now, remember the verse that Yeshua quoted from Psalm 118 in reference to himself. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This has come from Yahweh and it is marvelous in our eyes. That's the next verse, by the way. Verse 23 says, this has come from Yahweh and it is marvelous in our eyes. This is just as Joseph said to his brothers at the end of the story. When he reveals himself to them. They were afraid because of what they had done. And he said, what you did to me, you meant for evil, but God meant it for good. Because Israel's rejection of the stone, of Yeshua, and by the way, you can't reject the Son without rejecting the Father, because they're both in there. Aleph, Beit, Nun. You reject the Son, you reject the Father. But the rejection of the stone meant salvation for the entire world. Yeshua said, I and the Father are one. Right? Interestingly, what else is 53? You want to know what else is 53? Yeshua's name is 53 in ordinal gematria. Okay? In ordinal gematria means where the letter is positioned in the 22 letters of the alphabet. And you take the position of those and give them a number all the way to 22. Yeshua's name equals 53, and that reduces to 8. What else is 53? Torah. Torah in ordinal gematria is 53. Because Yeshua is what? The living Torah. You see how this all connects? These things are not a coincidence. This is called sod level interpretation. The meaning of numbers. Okay? You know what else is 53? Gan. Gan is the Hebrew word for garden. Okay? Adam died in a garden. But the second Adam was raised in a garden. Redemption is mankind brought back to paradise. You know what else is 53? Hayuvel, the Jubilee. The Jubilee is the 50th year, and it represents eternity. It's when all debts are canceled. So it's not surprising that the letters add up to 53, which reduces to 8. Mashiach is our Jubilee, our freedom, our release from all debts. And what's the one chapter that just really pulls it all together for Jews? They don't even read it in the Torah cycle. In Messianic, non-Yeshua believing Jewish synagogues, they will not read Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53. In that one chapter, it speaks of the death, the burial, the resurrection. It's all contained so explicitly because that which purchases our Jubilee is the death, the burial, and the resurrection. And that which brings us back to the Garden of Paradise is the death, the burial, and the resurrection. So no wonder it's Isaiah 53. You know, in the traditional song Ma'oz Sur, Rock of Ages, which we're going to sing at the end of the service, Mashiach is mentioned 5 times in first verse. Okay? The verse goes, Rock of Ages, it's Messiah. Let our song praise your saving power. There he is again. The saving power of Yahweh is Messiah. You amidst the raging foe were our sheltering tower. Messiah is our sheltering tower. Furious they assailed us, but your arm availed us. Isaiah 53 verse 1. To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? And your word, the word made flesh, your word broke their sword when our own strength failed us. 5 times he is mentioned in Rock of Ages, a traditional Jewish song at Hanukkah. Now I want to talk about the oil just a little bit. When you say the oil in Hebrew, you say hashemen. Now think about it. You can't have light, you can't have fire without oil. Okay? In a lamp. You cannot have it. Hashemen is the oil. Rearrange the letters and you can spell neshama, which is soul. And shemoneh, which is 8. Which symbolizes eternity. So this is sod level. But are there Peshat level, literal level scriptures to confirm this sod level? Yes, there are. There always is. Proverbs 20, verse 27. The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the inner depths of his heart. And Ecclesiastes 3:11, I love this verse. It says, he has set eternity in the heart of man. Isn't that amazing? So you see, you can't fill that place inside of you with pleasures, with knowledge, philosophy. Nothing fits. Money, it doesn't fit because those things are not eternal. There's only one thing, if you want to call it thing. Only one can fill an eternal place, and that is the eternal one. That's why we're only satisfied when he comes to dwell within us. Okay? Oil is a type and shadow of God's people. Oil and water do not mix. It always rises to the top. God's people always rise to the top. Oil is involved in dedication and consecration of kings, of priests, of prophets. And it's also involved in the connection to the Spirit of God, the Ruach, the mind of Messiah, the mindset of heaven. That's what oil represents. That's why they anoint kings and priests and prophets, so they can have the mind of heaven. The head is anointed because the mind, is the connection between the intangible and tangible realms. Dreams, thoughts. Heaven to earth, the king to the kingdom, the priest to the people. Everything that was connected to heaven was anointed with oil. And it's important to remember that the oil of heaven is endless. When you hook up with that oil, you have an endless supply. It's always new and it's always available. Now, an interesting thing happened. In 1988, check out the double H's. That's kind of cool too. In 1988, there was a cruise of ancient oil that was discovered in Israel. And they tested it and found that it dated back to a very ancient time in Israel's history, even so far back as the days of Aaron. You see, things like this are discovered because it's a sign to us. We are living in the days when Yahweh is dedicating a people, Jews and Gentiles connecting with one another and with the Messiah. One with one another and Messiah. The prophecies are being fulfilled. One of them from John 10:16, from this very chapter, where Yeshua says, I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must go and get them too and bring them in. And there'll be one sheepfold and one shepherd. He's talking about the Gentile nations. He had to go out and bring them in to redemption as well. Okay? Yeshua imparts his light to us. He said he was the light of the world. But then he told the people, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine among men, that they may glorify your Father in heaven. Isaiah 60 verse 1. Isaiah 60 precedes Isaiah 61. That's the portion that Yeshua read in the temple when he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Right? And they looked at him and said, what are you talking about? He said, this was fulfilled in your ears this day. But that chapter before that says, arise, shine, for your light has come. The Messiah has come. Hanukkah is a connection to the Messiah. But it's also every Jew. You're connected to every Jew in the past and the present. As Messiah is joined in solidarity with Israel, so are we. You know, Enoch's name is Hanuk in Hebrew, and his name meant dedicated. Isn't that something? Remember about him? Enoch was so dedicated to Yahweh that one day he was just walking along, and Yahweh just said, hey, why don't you just walk here with me? Come on up here. And he just was gone. Enoch was no more because he was so dedicated. Okay? You know, the things in this world can cause us to grow cold, can't they? The cares of this world, the troubles. Compromise always starts with a little thing. Just a little thing. That's how the devil starts off. Just a little compromise. Just a little. Right? And then it grows. If you start. Okay? We need to remain mindful of this and dedicate ourselves, rededicate ourselves to the devotion and the service of our King. This is what Hanukkah is about. Dedication to the shepherd. Dedication to the stone. The God with whom we are in covenant with. You know, there's an agenda to snuff out the knowledge of the truth, as I said before. The knowledge of the true Messiah and the true biblical faith. But Messiah promises that if we are his sheep, no one can snatch us out of his hand. God wants to raise up modern-day Maccabees, those who will stand faithful against the tyranny of the Antichrist system. So let us dedicate ourselves to be those Maccabees, dedicated to our shepherd, dedicated to the stone of Israel, who has given us a covenant of fire. Happy Hanukkah. We're going to sing Rock of Ages. And thank you, Michelle. Okay. All right, Rock of Ages. Are we up? High